Wow. Okay, so I made adjustments to the Breya deck, as you may know if you've seen the last video. And right after making them, I went 5-0. So that was awesome. I made a video. I passed out. It was very late. I slept most of the day, woke up with a migraine, and have been struggling to deal with that all day. But I finally shook it off with the help of some aspirin, caffeine, and food, and decided to log in and see if I could get some content for today. And the very first thing that happens, 5-0 with the Breya deck again. So I did make a couple of adjustments though to the deck from yesterday based on a number of factors, talking to Brian, checking out comments and thinking about what people were saying. And based on that, this is the current version of the Breya deck. And I don't expect to be making changes between now and the next video. I'll run right back in with this one yet again. So comment from I think Methany was that we should be using Cavern of Souls over either Flagstones or Dust Bowl, probably Dust Bowl. She said. I mentioned that comment to Bryant. He said he thought so as well, simply because of how powerful. Basically, Dust Bowl is an effect that we already have, and so we're getting redundancy with it. While on the other hand, Cavern of Souls is an effect we do not have. We're getting something unique and powerful and very well positioned against the top tier deck. So once I switched out Dust Bowl for Cavern of Souls, there was another card that Brian suggested, which was Legacy's Allure. And Legacy's Allure, which is this card here, is a very cheap card that you can get out underneath of a Baral and gives them almost no time at all to react to it. And in one turn, you can steal and take control of a Baral. But it's also good comfortably or significantly against green because you can take early threats, and if they don't really have any early threats, then you can just set and let it tick and play a normal game of Magic, and then if they ever get anything strong out, then you take that. So it's very difficult for them to really deal with outside of maybe World Breaker if the game goes long. But most games probably won't be going long with the way that this deck's been working. So mainly, the other thing is Legacy's Allure. Every upkeep, if you don't know, you get a counter on it. So you always want to right click and say always yes, always yield. And every upkeep you get a counter on it, and then you can sacrifice it to the only time to gain control of a creature whose power is equal to or less than the number of counters on it. So you could go Island. They go first turn Bird of Paradise. You go or Noble Hierarch. You go Island, Legacy's Allure, and then just sack it and take their mana creature right there, potentially as well, which is another cool use for it. And then what I was going to say is I did say always yield. If you think for some weird reason your opponent has a Crozen Grip that they're waiting to your upkeep to use, then you want to turn off those features, and then during your upkeep, at the moment you have priority, immediately sacrifice it and take something before they can do the grip. So I don't see that as ever really coming up, but it could, I suppose. The other thing about Legacy's Allure is in conjunction with Gilded Drake, what you can do is you can let Legacy's Allure to tick up to 3. You can Gilded Drake something that's much bigger than what Legacy's Allure can handle, and then you can just take your Drake back if you want to. It's not the greatest because you're trading a Legacy's Allure for a 3/3 flyer for a flying Grizzly Bear, or what is that? Not Grizzly Bear, but I forget what they're called now. The green one bear that the 3/3 for 2 from Homelands. But anyway, point is, you'd be trading in a control magic for a 3/3 flyer, which is decent, but probably if you're at a point in the game where they're dropping bombs, I'd probably just let them have the Gilded Drake, not steal it, save the Legacy's Allure for whatever their next fatty is, and then just use Breya's flyers to sack and kill the Gilded Drake, which is a really nice thing about, of course, playing this deck, is that you can deal with your Gilded Drake, which is one of the reasons why it makes more sense in here than it would make in a deck like, say, Alaro, although in Alaro you could give him a Gilded Drake and then just effectively only take 1 point of damage per turn, and that would be acceptable too. So let's take a look at some games. So anyway, like I said, the mana base changed because I took out Dust Bowl to put in Cavern of Souls, and then I needed a slot for Legacy's Allure. And at that point, I had Flagstones of Trocaire in here, but I figured, well, if I'm if I don't have Dust Bowl to combo with it, I mean, yes, it combos with Ravages, but probably Ravages and Armageddon. If I'm casting one of those cards, I'm probably just winning the game, whether or not I happen to get a free land out of the deal. So I don't necessarily need that combo. It was more for Dust Bowl for grindy games where you would need to you would want to like 2-for-1 them on the Dust Bowl over the course of time. But so with that being said, I took it out and I just put Legacy's Allure in the land slot, and we're back down to 32 lands, which is where we started. But I think it's probably acceptable. So and there's really no other card that I could easily imagine myself cutting. Um, Nothing else really stood to reason. Now the cool thing about Cavern of Souls is, I mentioned it in the last video, is other than Gilded Drake, who is a Drake, all of the creatures in the deck, all the whopping 3 or 4 that are in the deck, including Breya, they are all human. So you get the potential to have uncounterable Notion Thief against the Baral decks, which is a pretty savage beating, as is an uncounterable Dark Confidant, as is an uncounterable Breya, for that matter. So let's go back to, let's see, oop, there's my son. There we go, League Details, and let's take a look. So this is literally my first one of the night. May have more videos to come if things go well, but it was quick too, as you'll see. So let's take a look here. So I'm going to leave it on run. I hit to mulligan my first hand, and I tuck a Deprive to the bottom of the deck. My opponent's playing Marin, so always kind of a scary creature, but he keeps a no lander. He must have a savage, blah, if I could speak. He must have a totally savage hand. I'm not waiting around to find out though. Well, he's got a wasteland, but that's not so good here. When he's mana screwed, and on his turn he draws, and I think he realizes that 0 mana to 4. Well, 4 as soon as he lays a land is no bueno. As soon as he plays a swamp, of course, Felwar Stone will then produce black, which means I can cast my commander. So if he played a swamp here and did something relevant, if it wasn't too big of a deal, I'd just untap Grim Monolith and then slam my commander into play. Like for example, let's say he played a Bayou and cast like a Llanowar Elf or something. Yeah, then I just untap Grim, slam my commander into play, kill the elf right away, sacking the Grim and a bird, and then pass. And from there, I think, anyway, not super interesting of a game. I suppose that doesn't really speak to the power of the deck. I imagine everyone out here can beat their opponent when their opponent has no lands, so I won't pat myself on the back too hard for that. It must have been one heck of a hand, though. I don't know what. I'm imagining he had something where he thought he was going to be able to get a Crucible lock with that wasteland. Maybe he had some way to put it together and he just needed to find like 1 mana to get going. But anyway, so game 2 I'm playing against green-white, and I have this hand that's completely amazing. I'm actually going to get rid of a Wrath of God against a green deck because I can go first turn Talisman, and now my Chrome Mox is actually a dual color Chrome Mox, and there's Cavern of Souls putting in some work. If this were Dust Bowl, I couldn't cast Breya here, and I actually prefer to do it on the Cavern because I'd rather save my colored mana for after the impending Armageddon. My opponent uses his first turn to play an elf, second turn to recur a fetch land, so he's up to 4 mana. That seems like a good time to Armageddon and play a land. And I drew a Ponder for the turn, so I even get to Ponder post-Geddon. I see 3 lands, do not want them. I mean, I just like killed all the lands in play. Why would I want lands right now? Opponent plays Sylvan, hits me, realizing he's not really interested in trading. And what's really nice here is because I'm not using the Stifle effects anymore, so that Stoic Rebuttal previously was the 3 mana Stifle counterspell. It's now Stoic, and because it's Stoic, I can actually sack and treat it like a counterspell. So while it would have been cool to Stifle that here, I wouldn't have had the mana to do it. So I'm probably Spirit of the Labyrinth, which shuts off his Sylvan. It's pretty not really a good combo, but I was trying to decide what do I do about that. And I decide for tempo purposes, I'm going to counter it. Press for damage because I have this bounce land that ensures I'm going to hit 6 mana. If his follow-up is something like Land Oblivion, O-Ring or something to kill my Breya, it's actually a lot better than that for him. So kind of a bad situation. So I'm going to swing in. I see what I draw there, and I decide that I'm going to just kill his creature because I drew a counterspell, and I just need to hold the line a little bit. So he plays fetch land or pays life here, and I was thinking, I feel like this Bloom Tender's a bait spell. I don't know what made me feel that way, but I just decided not to counter it, even though a counter would win the game there. And It was kind of, but it's for a Court of Calling, not what I thought. I thought it was going to be for a Swords of Plowshares or something. So I don't know. I think it was a mistake to give him another turn like that. And look at this. Fortunately, he does not have a way to punish me, and boom, top deck Cryptic. Goodbye Dryad Arbor, goodbye opponent. You actually did a really nice job of recovering. So incidentally, I've played Armageddon many times over the years, starting in like 1996. And oh gosh, was I? Yeah, I was playing Armageddon in '96, back when it was Urnum Jin based green-white deck. So anyway, and what I can tell you, I think it was green, white, red actually, because there were pro white knights that you had to deal with from the Necropotence deck. So anyway, getting back to it though, you kind of want to be careful. So this Armageddon I played, it killed what? 2 of my lands and killed 3 of his. It's actually not a very good deal there. You generally want to Armageddon when you can take like the moment that they miss a land drop, or the turn before they're at a critical mass of lands. And my opponent really wasn't there yet, but because I had 6 points of power on the table and a lot of pressure, I felt like for tempo it was probably okay here, but it almost didn't work out, as you can see. And that's why generally you kind of want to let them have a few more lands in play and then blow the world up, where it's totally backbreaking rather than just merely in a stumble in the beginning. But if you are going to do it, make sure you have pressure out, because if you're going to go for the tempo-based stumble play where you just kill a few of their lands and they have time to recover their mana base, you've got to be applying pressure to them so that that time is actually costing them and rewarding you. Because if I didn't have Breya out, I never would have cast that Armageddon. So just a tip, if you're like coming to playing Armageddon in Commander and don't have a lot of past experience with it, then that's... So we had the guy who discarded Moy and in a Turnum. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. Anyway, so this guy in a Turnum is running Baral. And Baral, just suffice to say, Baral does not want to be... If my commander would just please stop doing that. Let's move it over a little bit. There we go. Suffice to say, Baral just really doesn't want to be playing against this deck much. I'm going to end of turn Mystical as a bait spell, and I get a Mental Misstep, which is huge, because now the Mental Misstep I top decked is 100% good. And I go for Orb, figuring his best play there would have been a... Hold on, I'm going to pause. So that Mental Misstep I drew was monstrous, because when I tap Orb and he's got 2 islands untapped, his only response to Orb from there is probably going to be something like Spell Snare or Spell Pierce. And because I drew Mental Misstep and took one out of his hand, if he played Snare or Pierce, I get a Mental Misstep it. And then if he follows up with the other one, let's say he had both, I get to daze it and guarantee a land drop. But backing up, let's say he has neither of those things, and instead he would have tapped 2 and cast Counterspell. Well, then I'm just going to daze that. And so it was kind of a no-win situation. Outside of Force of Will or something involving like misdirection or something, my opponent was not... Once that Mental Misstep was out of his hand and I drew one, he was not going to stop that Winter Orb. And against Baral, Winter Orb is like the kiss of death, because now we get to play Draw Go, except I'm a deck that's geared up for Winter Orb shenanigans, and Baral is not. And I am getting so lucky with the lands. So we're just going to chill out here, keep hitting land drops, try to get my opponent to take an action. Sorry about that. And so he cast Brainstorm. Of course, I could Mental Misstep that, but the purpose of the misstep is not to prevent Brainstorms. The purpose of the misstep is to prevent my opponent from either winning, answering the board, or preventing me from winning. And that's only if the play I'm making is like a game winner. So like I will Mental Misstep anything here happily, because a Crucible Worlds with the Winter Orb is just so backbreaking. So my opponent plays Delay, so I go ahead and fetch in response to see if he's got like a Stifle I can target. Rather, he does not, so I Spell Pierce, and then Daze, and I still have mana for Misstep, and I can pay 1 for any kind of Force Spike effect, so even if he were to daze me back. So I now get to hit a land drop, and I'm sitting on Deprived Misstep, and my opponent's in a bad way. So normally, like playing a Spell Pierce that just taps 2 of your opponent's lands is a bad play, right? You're going down cards. But with a Winter Orb out, it was effectively 2 sinkholes for 1 blue, which is insane. And I still pushed the Winter Orb down. Oh, I still got the Crucible down, and you can see the damage it's doing to my opponent now. So my opponent gets to see my hand with Gatoxian Probe. And also Winter Orb has made his Quiet Speculation really hard for my opponent to use. I'm going to go ahead and just keep eating some damage here for a little while. And then my opponent has too many cards in hand, so he discards Emrakul, and that Quiet Speculation is completely undone. He never even got a single card off it, to my knowledge. No, he didn't. Nothing's exiled, so just complete waste there. All right, so at the end of my opponent's turn, I feel like I've got a pretty good amount of cards that I can safely make a play here, but I don't want to do anything I don't want to spend too much mana. I do not have an answer if he can push Polymorph through. So I'm going to go for Allure and try to prevent him from ever getting a chance to do so. End of turn, he into the Royals my Winter Orb, and I'm like, yeah, that's fine, I'll just replay it. Repeals my Legacy's Allure, sure. You going to try to go off now? He is. All right, well, let's have a battle. Deprive that. And he's got, this is so nice for me, Cryptic Command, Disrupt. Don't think so, sir. Oh my gosh, that's just backbreaking. It could have gone poorly, but, and look at the next card, Force of Will. It could have gone poorly, but no, that went about as good as you could ask for. All right, so opponent gets a Mishra's out. He gets another Git Probe because he shuffled the last one back in. And okay, Legacy's Allure is going to tick up. We're going to kill that Mishra's. Replay Wasteland in case he has another non-basic for me to target. Other than that, I'm going to go back to playing Islands. And I now have Baral, so this is swiftly moving downhill for my opponent. Stop decking an Ancient Tomb is nice, because that means Fact or Fiction's 3 mana. Right now it's only 2 lands, which is pretty good. So let's go for it. And look at that horrible... Like, that Fact or Fiction from the opponent's perspective has got to be... Look, it's really just totally bending his noodle. And at this point, he realized there's just no way to split that successfully, and he just scoops. If he gives me 1 counterspell and 4 mana rocks, I'm taking 4 mana rocks, no question, right? And if he gives me a counterspell and any number of mana rocks, in that case, I'm going to take the counterspell and the rock and untap Ancient Tomb and just play it and have exactly perfect, I'll have 9 cards in hand, play a land is 8, cast mana rock is 7, so it's just too perfect. I mean, he knows what the rest of my hand is too, so he just scoops it up. I mean, there was no... I'm going to beat him down with Baral until he gives up, or I'm going to eventually find... I'm eventually going to either find Breya or just push Ravages of War through and crush his mana base that way. It's done and over. The ideal thing for me at that point would probably to have been to have gotten... waited for Cavern of Souls and Notion Thief or Cavern of Souls Breya, and then just play a threat that he cannot answer, forcing him to do something on his turn. Then I get to fight a counter war with reduced cost counter spells thanks to Baral on my team. And then, so anyway. So my opponent playing mono black, it's first turn Inquisition. I comment how cool it is. He's playing something, new, but he takes Muddle the Mixture and leaves me with Ancestral, and that's going to matter later. And I get top deck Mana Leak, which really, really helps here because otherwise I would have get by a miniature Hymn to Torok there from Stupor. And now, however, I get to brainstorm, figure out exactly what I want to do here, which cards I want to hide on top of my deck. I get to play land tax. And I'm not going to fetch because the cards I hit on my deck were very, very good. So this turn, I will, however, cast. So I get Badlands in order to allow me to have 2 black and also a red for Breya later so that I'm able to cast Vindicate on his artifact mana and Dark Confidant. And I was fully expecting Confidant to die here, but rather he gets Cabal Coffers and then mutilates the Confidant. But on this turn, I just want you to see how insane this turn is. I'm about to stack Ancestral Visions underneath a land tax, draw 3 cards from land tax, 3 from the Visions, and go tutor up Scroll Rack, draw for the turn Scroll Rack, and then I'm going to rack away almost all of my hand. What an insane turn. So my opponent had 2 cards in hand, and so did I, and suddenly he's now playing against a full hand. I do play a land there, which allows him to, allows the tax rack effect to turn off, because I know full well that he has to continue to hit land drops with Cabal Coffers in play. And I also knew that he was short on mana to do what he just did, cast Sidisi and exploit itself. So I knew I was going to get another hit on the land tax, and so it made more sense for me to develop. And with Force of Will out there, it made a ton more sense for me to develop. So my opponent has Demonic Tutored here, and I have no idea what he got, but I'm not caring to find out. During my upkeep, I Mystical Teachings for Mystical Tutor, draw for the turn, draw Armageddon, play a land. One of my land tax lands. Fortunately, I have 3 more in the deck, or I have 1 more in the deck, and I'll be able to make it 3 in a few minutes. I had exactly 8 mana to do all this, plus 1, minus 1, so it's 4 for Teachings, 4 for Armageddon, 1 for Tutor, which is why I had to play a land drop to hit my 9th land. And I'm about to Armageddon with Force of Will backup and a land tax on the board, plus 3 mana rocks and a Breya. Yeah, I would say this is probably game over. He says that Mana League top deck. I was like, yeah, very timely. True, true. And of course, it could have been any number of could have been, Mana League, could have been Negate, could have been Memory Lapse, could have been Remand, could have been Disrupt, could have been Spell Pierce. I mean, there's a lot of things it could have been, but point is, if it had, it did, the odds were still favorable that it wasn't one of those things. So that was a very lucky draw for me, and as you could see, it made a big difference in this game. So, but that was it. 5 games powered through very quickly, very smooth. But I didn't face. I mean, I only faced one of the big 3 decks, so I didn't face like the kind of, I'm not facing like, you know, the Baral Barrage, for example, is just endlessly grinding against that horrible deck. Or, I didn't face like Tassiger. I didn't see Nissa. So yet to know for sure whether or not it's just flukes, if I'm just good against like tier 2 decks that are, metagame decks trying to beat the big 3, or if I'm actually, because clearly that's what that black deck was, and he got to the finals, so it's clearly working as well. It's just black. Black does not like Armageddon or Winter Orb at all. So, in fact, no monocolor decks do, except for maybe mono red, possibly white. But like the monocolor control decks, green, blue, black, do not like those cards. So, anyway, that's it. And again, I'll bring up the deck list. I believe it'll pop back up in case you need to see it. I'm going to scroll down. Here it is, and all of its format adapted glory. And that's it. That's all I've got for this one. Hope you enjoyed watching. I'll see you next time, and we'll see if we can come up with another 5-0.